It was December 3rd, 1976, a quiet evening in Kingston, Jamaica, but in an instant, that peace was shattered. Gunshots rang out in the middle of Bob Marley's home. Chaos ensued as Bob, along with his wife Rita and his manager, Don Taylor, were struck by bullets. Miraculously, Bob survived, but the attack left more than just physical wounds. Who would want to harm the man whose music had touched millions? This wasn't just an ordinary attack, it was a political assassination attempt. But why would someone target Bob Marley? What had he done to become such a powerful figure that his very existence threatened those in power? To truly understand why Bob Marley became a target, we need to rewind. We need to go back to the roots of his journey, to where it all began. Bob Marley was born into poverty on February 6, 1945, in the small rural village of 9 Mile, Jamaica. From the very beginning, life was a struggle. His mother, Ella Booker, a black Jamaican, raised him alone after his father, Norval Marley, a white Englishman, abandoned them before Bob was even a year old. For much of his life, Bob rarely spoke of his father, and in fact, many who knew him personally didn't even know what his father looked like. Bob's upbringing was shaped more by his mother's strength than by the man who had fathered him. Ella did her best to raise Bob in the face of adversity. But the hardship didn't end there. At just 12 years old, Bob moved from the serene hills of 9 Mile to Trenchtown, Kingston, one of Jamaica's toughest ghettos. It was a world away from the quiet countryside where he was born, a place known for its poverty, crime, and the constant struggle to survive. Trenchtown would shape Bob Marley in ways he could never have predicted. It was here, in this bustling, often dangerous part of Kingston, that his destiny would begin to unfold. Surrounded by the harsh realities of life in the ghetto, Bob found solace in music. And as we'll soon see, it was this very environment that fueled his music and led him to become the icon we know today. So, in the heart of Trenchtown, amid the sounds of street vendors and the rhythm of everyday struggle, a young Bob Marley began to find his voice. At just 13 years old, Bob met Joe Higgs, a local musician who would become one of his first mentors. Joe was a seasoned musician in the neighborhood, known for his smooth, soulful voice and his ability to play guitar. He saw something in Bob, something raw and untamed, a natural talent waiting to be shaped. And so, he took Bob under his wing, teaching him the intricacies of the guitar and the power of music as a form of expression. By the time Bob was 16, his world was entirely consumed by music. He wasn't just playing guitar anymore, he was living it, breathing it. And it was this passion that led him to record his first single, Judge Not. It was a big moment for a young artist, stepping into the studio with dreams of making it big. But reality hit hard, the single flopped. It didn't make a dent in the Jamaican music scene, and for Bob, it was a tough pill to swallow. But even in the face of failure, he didn't give up. In fact, he learned more from that flop than most artists would from a string of successes. By 1963, Bob's ambition grew stronger. He didn't just want to make music, he wanted to make a statement. This was the year he formed the Wailers, alongside his childhood friends Peter Tosh and Bunny Wailer. They were more than just a group, they were a movement in the making. Together, they blended ska, rocksteady, and the emerging sounds of reggae to create something entirely unique, a sound that resonated with the oppressed, the poor, and the voiceless in Jamaica. But the early years were not without struggle. The Wailers worked tirelessly, rehearsing in any spare moment they had, scraping by with what little money they could earn. They were living in a time when Jamaican music was going through significant changes, but the Wailers had something the others didn't. They had heart, soul, and the power of their message. In the beginning, they struggled to find their voice, caught between competing musical styles and trying to define what reggae really was. But it wasn't just about the music for Bob. It was about speaking to the people, telling their stories, and giving them something to hold on to. They were still trying to figure out their sound, trying to make their mark in a crowded industry. They were learning from every failure, adjusting and growing, always refining their craft. Then, in 1966, something happened that would forever change the course of their journey. After struggling for years, something clicked. But what happened next would forever change their sound. But before that, in 1964, the hard work finally began to pay off. The Wailers, still a relatively unknown group, recorded their first big hit, Simmer Down. It was an anthem for the people, a track that captured the frustration and hope of everyday Jamaicans living in the heart of Kingston's ghettos. The song skyrocketed to #1 in Jamaica, marking the beginning of their rise. But even with this newfound success, the road to fame was far from smooth. While the song gave them recognition, it didn't come with the financial security they needed. In those early days, money was scarce. The Wailers were constantly battling to make ends meet, even with their new success. The music industry in Jamaica was a tough place, especially for a young group trying to break out of the ghetto. Bob, like the others in the band, took on odd jobs to survive. It wasn't unusual to find Bob working as a welder, a job he took up to pay the bills before he could commit to music full-time. In fact, Bob Marley was a welder before he was a musician. Many people don't know this, but Bob was just like many others in the ghetto, trying to make a living any way he could while dreaming of something more. But despite Simmer Down hitting the top spot, the financial rewards were still far from what the band expected. The Wailers were getting some recognition, but they were still struggling to make a living from their music. The record label didn't pay them what they were worth, and they were constantly on the verge of financial collapse. Their growing popularity didn't automatically translate to success in the bank. They were a band living paycheck to paycheck, with each member struggling to make ends meet. At one point, things got so tough that the Wailers almost broke up. The dream that Bob and his friends had worked so hard for seemed like it might come to an end, and it wasn't just about money. It was the exhaustion, the constant grind, and the pressure of trying to turn something so deeply personal into a career. They felt stuck, like they were putting everything into the music, yet it wasn't paying off the way they had hoped. But Bob was no stranger to hard work and struggle. The Wailers' future hung in the balance, and Bob had a choice: quit music and return to a life of ordinary jobs, or fight for his dream. He chose to fight. The fire that burned in him wasn't going out. Bob Marley wasn't just making music. Through the darkest days, Bob's dream stayed alive, and soon, that fight would pay off. The world was about to hear something revolutionary, something that would change the course of music history forever. But before that, Bob had to make sure his voice was not just heard in Jamaica, but across the globe. So, by 1966, Bob Marley's life was on the cusp of a transformation that would alter the trajectory of not only his career but also his entire worldview. During this pivotal year, Bob's personal and professional worlds collided, setting him on a path that would forever define him. It was in this year that Bob Marley's music found its true calling, shaped by an unexpected and profound spiritual awakening. Around this time, Bob married Rita Anderson, a woman who would not only become his wife but also a vital part of his journey. Their union marked a significant shift in Bob's personal life. Rita, a talented singer in her own right, shared Bob's passion for music, and together they built a family that would later contribute to Bob's legacy. However, the relationship was far from easy. It was during these years that Bob's personal life and professional ambitions began to clash, with his growing popularity and his commitment to Rastafarianism adding a layer of complexity. In an interesting twist, before fully diving into the world of music, Bob took a brief break from his career to try and secure financial stability. Bob visited the United States and worked at a Chrysler factory in Delaware for a short period. This rarely known chapter in his life shows a side of Bob that few recognize, one where he was just another man trying to make a living. But his time in the US didn't last long. He returned to Jamaica, where music was calling him back with even greater intensity. In the same year, Bob's encounter with Mortimer Plano, a Rasta elder, would mark the beginning of his spiritual journey into Rastafarianism. Mortimer introduced Bob to the teachings of Rastafari, a faith that emphasized the divinity of Haile Selassie I, the former emperor of Ethiopia, and the deep connection to African roots. This wasn't just a religious conversion, it was an awakening that would resonate throughout Bob's music and his life. As if to confirm the spiritual path Bob was embarking on, a key moment occurred in 1966 that would solidify his Rastafarian beliefs. Haile Selassie visited Jamaica that year, and for many Rastafarians, including Bob, this visit was seen as nothing short of a divine sign. To Bob, it confirmed what he had been learning from the elders: Haile Selassie was the living God. This event sparked a wave of religious fervor among Jamaicans, and for Bob, it became a catalyst for change. He embraced Rastafarianism with a newfound intensity, letting it guide his personal philosophy and influence his music like never before. The Rastafarian teachings became more than just a spiritual belief for Bob. They were woven into his identity, shaping everything from his political views to his music. With his hair now growing into the iconic dreadlocks, Bob's image became synonymous with Rastafarianism, and his music began to reflect the depth of his beliefs. He was no longer just a musician trying to make a name for himself. He was a messenger, using his voice to spread the message of peace, unity, and resistance against oppression. And as Bob embraced his new identity, something else began to happen. The music he was making was no longer just songs about love and loss. It was now infused with the weight of his newfound spirituality. He was beginning to use his music as a vehicle for change, for empowerment, for the people. Bob was becoming more than just an artist, he was a prophet in his own right. From this moment on, Bob's music would never be the same. His message was growing clearer, more focused, and more urgent. He wasn't just writing for himself or his fans anymore. He was writing for the oppressed, for the marginalized, and for those who needed a voice to speak out against the injustice they faced every day. This was the beginning of Bob Marley, the icon, the man whose music would carry the voices of the voiceless across the world. But what would this transformation mean for the music industry? What would his growing influence do to the world's perception of reggae and Rastafari? Bob had no idea just how far his music would go or how deeply it would resonate across generations. But one thing was certain: the world was about to hear a new Bob Marley, one with a message more powerful than anything anyone had ever heard before. Reggae, as we know it today, didn't appear out of nowhere. It evolved from Jamaica's earlier music forms, ska and rocksteady. Ska, with its up-tempo, brass-heavy sound, gave way to rocksteady, a slower, more soulful rhythm that began to reflect the island's social struggles. But in the early 1970s, a new sound began to emerge. This sound would become the heartbeat of a generation: reggae. A sound that fused rhythm, blues, jazz, and the influence of the spiritual movement Bob was now deeply immersed in. It was raw, it was real, and it spoke to the oppressed. For Bob Marley, reggae was not just music, it was a platform to spread his message. And in 1973, everything began to fall into place. The Wailers released their breakthrough albums Catch a Fire and Burnin'. These albums, packed with anthems like Stir It Up and Concrete Jungle, were Bob's global calling card. They weren't just albums, they were statements. Songs like Get Up, Stand Up urged listeners to fight for their rights, while tracks like Redemption Song became anthems of liberation. The Wailers began their first international tour, taking their message and their music beyond Jamaica. Their first stop, the UK. They played for sold-out crowds, and the response was overwhelming. Soon after, they were in the United States, where they were greeted by a mix of curiosity and admiration. The crowd at their shows was unlike anything Bob had ever experienced, people from all walks of life, from different countries, singing along to songs they could barely understand, but still felt deeply. In New York, Bob and the band had the chance to open for none other than Bruce Springsteen, a rare fact that not many people know. The connection between the two musicians was clear. Both spoke to the people. But while Springsteen had his roots in blue-collar America, Bob was speaking for the oppressed people of the world, whether they were in Kingston or the backstreets of New York City. But success, as Bob would soon learn, came at a cost. With fame came pressure, expectations, and a growing target on Bob's back. The more his music spread across the globe, the more people began to notice his influence. And with that influence came those who didn't want to see him succeed. Bob's music was becoming a rallying cry for the disillusioned, and that was exactly what many political powers feared. By 1974, Bob Marley and the Wailers had become international icons. But success brought more than just fame, it brought personal turmoil. The pressures of fame began to take its toll on the group, and tensions within the Wailers began to grow. The band had always been a close-knit family, but as Bob's star began to shine brighter, it caused cracks in the foundation. Peter Tosh and Bunny Wailer, the other two founding members, left the band, leaving Bob to continue on his own. The breakup was more than just a professional split, it was personal. Peter and Bunny had been more than bandmates, they were Bob's brothers. But as Bob grew in stature, his vision began to pull him in a different direction. He wasn't just trying to be a musician anymore, he was trying to be a voice for the voiceless, a symbol of resistance and unity. With their departure, Bob was left to rebuild, but rebuild he did. Bob formed a new lineup for the Wailers, bringing in fresh talent, but the new group was more than just a band. They were now a movement. In 1975, Bob Marley recorded his first global hit outside of Jamaica, No Woman, No Cry, which went on to become one of his most beloved tracks. The song, a reflection of both hardship and hope, struck a chord with audiences everywhere. It was a simple message, but it resonated deeply. Bob's music was becoming more than just entertainment, it was a unifying force that transcended cultures and continents. But as Bob's influence grew, so did his enemies. His political stance, his embrace of Rastafarianism, and his outspoken voice for social change made him a target for powerful forces, both in Jamaica and abroad. And the road ahead would prove far more dangerous than Bob could have ever anticipated. Then in December 1976, just as Bob was preparing for a concert that would bring him even more attention, everything changed. Bob Marley, the man who had become the voice of the oppressed, was nearly silenced forever. Gunmen stormed his home, firing shots at Bob, his wife Rita, and his manager, Don Taylor. The attack, which took place just days before a crucial concert, was an attempt on Bob's life that left the world in shock. Bob, despite the gunshots that pierced his body, refused to cancel his upcoming performance. 2 days later, with a bullet still lodged in his arm, Bob performed at the Smile Jamaica concert. The sheer will and courage it took to perform just days after being shot was extraordinary. He was not just a musician, he was a symbol of resistance, and no bullet would stop him from continuing his fight. But who was behind the attack? Why did Bob suddenly flee Jamaica after the shooting? Was it truly an assassination attempt orchestrated by those who wanted to silence him, or was there more to the story? As the gunshots rang out in his home, the attack was only the beginning of a greater battle Bob would soon have to face. After the assassination attempt, Bob knew he could no longer stay in Jamaica. The political tension was too high, and his life was in danger. In early 1977, Bob fled Jamaica, moving to London, where he would spend the next couple of months in self-imposed exile. But in the quiet of his exile, a masterpiece was born. In 1978, after almost 2 years of exile, Bob Marley returned to Jamaica. It wasn't just a return to his homeland, it was a return to his mission. The political climate in Jamaica had become incredibly tense, with rival political factions divided by violence and hatred. Bob, however, saw an opportunity. He saw a way to unite a broken country through his music. And so, he organized one of the most remarkable events in reggae history, the One Love Peace Concert. At this concert, Bob did something unprecedented. In a symbolic act of unity, Bob invited the two most prominent political leaders of Jamaica, Michael Manley and Edward Seaga, to join him on stage. The moment they shook hands, it was more than just a gesture, it was a powerful statement that transcended politics, that embraced peace over division. The crowd erupted in cheers, as people across Jamaica held their breath, hoping that this act would be the spark of lasting peace. But even in this moment of triumph, the toll of the years was becoming too much for Bob. Behind the scenes, Bob collapsed from sheer exhaustion. The demands of being both an international icon and a political figure were beginning to take their toll. He had pushed himself to the limit, and the physical strain was finally catching up to him. But, as much as the crowd celebrated that day, something more serious was happening within Bob's body, a battle that would soon prove to be his most personal yet. It was in 1977 that Bob Marley's world was suddenly thrown into chaos. During a routine checkup, doctors discovered that Bob had melanoma, a deadly form of skin cancer, on his toe. The diagnosis came as a shock, but Bob's response was even more surprising. In accordance with his Rastafarian beliefs, which emphasized the natural state of the body, Bob refused to undergo the amputation that his doctors recommended. To him, his body was sacred, and he believed that the illness was part of a greater spiritual journey. Despite his diagnosis, Bob didn't slow down. He continued to perform, continuing the tour that had already taken him around the world. His fans never suspected anything was wrong, because Bob Marley, the icon, kept performing as if nothing could break his spirit. But inside, the cancer was slowly spreading, and Bob's health began to deteriorate. In September 1980, Bob played what would become his last ever concert in Pittsburgh, USA. The performance was nothing short of legendary, as he gave everything he had left to the crowd, pouring his heart and soul into every song. But behind the bright lights and roaring crowds, Bob was fighting a battle that would soon take everything from him. He gave everything he had, but time was running out. By May 1981, Bob Marley's condition had worsened. He was no longer the vibrant, energetic performer he once was. His body had been ravaged by cancer, and his health was quickly declining. On May 11, 1981, Bob Marley passed away in Miami at the age of just 36. His death left the world in shock, and fans across the globe mourned the loss of a legend, someone who had not only defined reggae but had also become a global symbol of peace, unity, and resistance. Bob's final words were to his son Ziggy Marley, "Money can't buy life." Those words were a profound reflection of Bob's journey, a reminder that the things we often chase, wealth, fame, material success, mean nothing in the face of life's greatest truth. Bob had lived his life with purpose, and now, in his final moments, he left behind a legacy that would forever shape the world. Bob Marley's funeral in Jamaica was nothing short of monumental. Thousands of mourners lined the streets, including the Prime Minister of Jamaica, who paid his respects to the man who had helped unite the country. The funeral was a mix of Rastafarian rituals and traditional Jamaican funeral customs, as Bob's friends, family, and fans said their final goodbyes. In a final, symbolic gesture of the man Bob had always been, he was buried with his guitar, a Bible, and even a stalk of ganja, all items that held deep meaning for Bob and his beliefs. His funeral was a testament to the man he had been, and the impact he had made on the world. Though Bob Marley's life was tragically short, his legacy has only grown stronger with time. In 1994, Bob Marley was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, solidifying his place in the history of modern music. And in 1999, his album Exodus was named Album of the Century by Time magazine. A year later, One Love was voted Song of the Millennium by the BBC, a fitting tribute to a song that has transcended generations and still unites people across the globe. Bob's influence has stretched far beyond reggae. His music has impacted countless genres, from hip-hop to pop, and his message of social justice and unity has inspired movements and individuals worldwide. Even today, Bob's words continue to resonate, and his music remains as powerful as ever. Artists like Ziggy Marley, Damian Marley, and others have carried on his legacy, keeping his message alive through their music. But it's not just about the music, it's about the movement Bob started. In the years following his death, Bob Marley's legacy has been honored through numerous tributes, documentaries, and exhibitions, proving that his influence is far from over. His messages of peace, unity, love, and resistance continue to inspire people from all walks of life. Bob Marley wasn't just a musician, he was a cultural icon, a revolutionary, and a spiritual leader who helped change the world through his music. Bob Marley didn't just make music, he changed the world. His songs still speak to the oppressed, the marginalized, and those who long for freedom and justice. His voice has become a symbol of hope for millions, and his legacy will continue to live on in the hearts of all who listen to his music and embrace his message. Now that you've learned about the incredible journey of Bob Marley, we want to hear from you. What do you think was Bob Marley's greatest impact? Was it his music, his political activism, or something else? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to continue exploring legendary stories like this, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Don't miss out on the incredible stories of those who changed the world.